Hello, viewers, and welcome to Spotlight here on Hope TV, where you look and live. And on Spotlight, we do our very best each time to bring to you persons who are changing our society in the direction of light, and also bring to you discussions that are helpful to us, especially concerning the church calendar. And right now we are in the Easter season, and the Easter season has a lot of things. You know, we have the cross, you know, we have the resurrection, we have, Palm Sunday, we have the Holy Communion, all those things. And most of the churches are doing lots of things during what is called this Lenten period, this Holy Week. A lot's going on. The church is alive with a lot of things. But we all know that there are questions and issues and things we need explained and to be reminded over and over again, especially around the cross, around the resurrection, and to help us in answering some of the questions, engaging some of the issues around the cross, is Reverend Thegu Mutahi, who is coming to us from the Presbyterian Church of East Africa, and also he is a cultural and spiritual consultant, and we are glad to welcome you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Reverend.
Oh, wow.
Today you must have a thinking cap on.
You did.
When it comes to the cross and the empty tomb and the communion, the Last Supper,
Yes.
there's a lot of things.
Indeed.
Sometimes we assume we know, but sometimes we also suppress our questions.
We do.
And viewers, you are part of this conversation, even as we have Reverend Thegu Mutahi lead us in this engagement. Please do text us on 22232. That's our text message line. Also engage us on Twitter and Facebook. You are always part of this conversation. And welcome to Spotlight. Well, Reverend, welcome.
Thank you.
Every time we have these thinking things, we call you.
Oh,
I'm
humbled.
Yeah, meaning that the viewers really like your responses.
Yes.
They like the way you engage things. And this is Easter, right?
Yeah, sure it is.
A very high season for the church. Very high season. And, but sometimes you ask yourself, there's Easter, there's Christmas that's going to come. And this, what we can call like church feasts, they are very prominent. They're very highly charged. And, people are mobilized about them, mobilized around them. Programs are made around these church feasts or church days.
Yes.
But I want to ask a question that most of viewers would want to know. If you quantify, the value of these feasts, what exactly would you come up with? Are they valuable? And if so, how valuable are they?
Well, just as you say, it's a very important season for the church. And there are so many things that are planned and executed within the period. But at the same time, it's somehow, we have got used to it, that Easter will come, we do 1, 2, 3 things, and maybe not reap the maximum benefits that come from Easter, and really get the meaning of what it is. Much as a lot is said in the Bible in regard to that season. I remember Apostle Paul has talked in depth about the Easter season, the whole issue of crucifixion, of resurrection, and the central part it has in our Christian journey. But it's like many of us, yes, we'll remember when it comes. We have scheduled some events, some revival meetings, some what we call crusades. But for sure, do we take time to meditate about what it really means to us? My answer would be no. It's like just something that pops up in our calendar, and we have to do something because that season is there, and we got it from our fathers. So we have to do something related to the crucifixion and the resurrection. But maybe we never take adequate time to study it and get the full meaning that comes from it. So my take would be that maybe we need to be a bit more studious in our execution of Easter, in our execution of what is crucifixion, what did it entail, what does it mean to us, what should we be doing, should it only happen when it happens, and we had no prior preparations, and thereafter do we do a stock taking of actually what did we do, and in our spiritual journey, where is it taking us? These are issues that maybe we need to interrogate over time, and I find like sometimes we don't. Maybe there are some of us who do it, But I think a majority of us just get into the bandwagon.
Okay.
It's Easter.
You know, in this, just before we began our program, we were talking about Zwingli and Luther.
Yes.
And how Zwingli was telling Luther he's moving, but he's not moving far enough.
Sure.
From where he had come from.
He did.
And let's just imagine.
Yes.
I'd assume Easter is not on the church calendar.
Yes.
Or it's not put in the calendar as we know it.
Yes.
Would that make a difference in the church? Would it make a difference in the community if it was removed? Say like Easter just flows just like any other weekend. Would the society feel it that something has moved?
Let me dare say that maybe there are churches which would learn without Easter. Mm-hmm. Because it's just an interruption of what we do. Maybe there are things that we have planned to do. Then Easter has come and we have to stop doing them because Easter has come and we have to find a place for it. So sometimes it's uninvited. It just comes. But for reality is that it's a very important season for our faith.
At it, I'm reminded of some of the accusations that are within, the kingdom, so to speak, the church.
Yes.
That this is it's simply a religious feast.
Yes.
It is for those who are not spiritual. It's for the religious,
Yes.
The category of some people work on religion, others work on, true authentic spirituality.
Yes.
There are those kinds of debates sometimes.
Yeah, sure. For sure. It's, as I've said, maybe those people who get the full benefit of Easter may not necessarily be Christians. Mm-hmm. There are people who will have a long weekend for themselves. With them and their families, they're able to travel without a lot of interruption. They're able to relax. They don't have to wake up early. So these are the people who tell you that we need Easter. I'm sure if it was banned, they would be on the streets with placards. I'm saying we need Easter. We need Easter.
That's really sad.
Down with the government if it has banned Easter.
Because we need it to holiday.
We need it. We need it. But for
Christians may not complain too much, or they may not lose so much. Interesting.
I know there is a group of Christians who would complain because they really look forward to Easter, knowing what it did in their salvation journey.
Yes.
But there are others, as I said, who may see it like something that just pops up. And here it is now. What do we do? Let's try and do something because we have to show like we are very serious about it. Then that weekend is done and we get to do something else.
You hinted also to the people who would actually lose more.
Yes.
Or feel more are the people who don't necessarily do church, and there's that, corrosion of the Easter season by the commercial side, such that people are more aware of the holiday than God, than the cross.
Yes.
And one wonders, should now the church try to redeem, Easter from commerce, or should the church try to see how within commerce it can be able to express its message of Easter?
The church should retrieve what are its values to itself. It should retrieve them because, of course, for them to get to be commercialized, they were got from the church. It's some enterprising people who thought this is business that we can do out of Easter. In the same way, when maybe possibly there is a wedding or a funeral, there are people who come up with enterprising ideas, how they make benefits out of a funeral or out of a wedding. And for sure, it's like they leave the place better than those who are mourning or those who had seriously come to attend the funeral or the wedding, because they were able to think beyond what the event was all about. So in the same way, because it appears that the commercial people have hijacked or have taken over, and fully we can't blame them. It's sometimes because there's a gap. But I think it's now the responsibility of the church to get Easter and explain it first to itself. Explain Easter to itself, to the church. And then be prepared for it, maybe even months before Easter comes. That this is the time we need to teach our people what it really means. Even start teaching early. But it cannot be that it has come to us as a surprise, and then we are expected to teach people about its meaning. Because I'm sure there are people who are reminded by, the business people, the adverts that come, that it is Easter. Maybe people in church, sometimes maybe they are reminded by what the advertisers are doing, and they may, oh, you mean it's Easter? And then, our matatu people, You know, they have their palm floods almost a week before. And it's like they're telling us it's Easter, so we need to get what goes with Easter.
Yeah,
So I think the responsibility falls on the church to once again arm itself theologically for Easter. Well, in advance, even before Easter comes, and ask ourselves, is Easter central in our faith? Of course it is. Then, how do we prepare for it?
Yeah, and how do we now, execute it? Let me use the word execute in the context of communities, so that even the people who are not church people know that something big is happening. Right?
Yes.
And you're right on that. That it's really up to us to rediscover it ourselves.
Indeed.
And then we are able then to share it out with others.
Certainly.
With the intensity that it brings.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Now,
but you also realize that good things are abused in all contexts. Good things are abused. But it's up to those who know about their importance, their significance, to call people back to order. But if we are not able to call them back to order, then they will look bad. It may get to a point where you feel like Christmas and Easter should be proscribed because they cause so much damage. You remember the many accidents that sometimes happen during Easter. Families breaking because of Easter, because husbands or wives have taken time out of their families to go and do some other funny things. So it gets to a point that this good thing has been so much abused that sometimes it becomes even detrimental to our own life. So I think that's why we need to go back to the roots of what Easter is and teach it with a lot of intensity.
All right.
Yes.
The word intensity it's good, especially as we engage some of the things around the cross. Because they are intense.
Yes,
they
are.
And for instance, we had quite a number of questions that people always want to get answers for. For instance, in Matthew 27, there is the account, the narrative about when Jesus is on the cross. And he says, Eloi, Eloi, Father, why? Why have you forsaken me? And at that particular point, it is said that the curtain of the cross, of the temple, just cuts all the way down. And then an interesting aspect there, that tombs, actually opened up, and people were seen to walk in the streets. And there's quite a bit of imagination there. Now, one asks themselves, was this symbolic, or was it actually historical?
I wouldn't want to take it as something that happened in terms of physical. I think the whole issue, the theology behind it, is that it was a turning point. The death of Jesus Christ, the moment he was dead and said it is finished, it was something radical that happened to humanity and to the universe. Because you remember, Apostle Paul talks about the entire creation looking forward to redemption. Because you remember when God, proclaimed the curse upon Adam and Eve, we are told the soil was also cursed. Therefore, the entire creation looks forward to redemption. So redemption was something that was looked forward to, it was anticipated. So when it's a radical thing when Jesus said, now it has happened.
Okay.
It is finished.
All right. There's something you've said there that you would want to see it more as a theological expression of a radical event.
Yes.
So then, from your understanding, and also being a scholar, so you want to say that this is unlikely to have been historical?
That would be my interpretation, that it's unlikely to have been a historical event.
It's unlikely that tombs opened up.
That's my view. I'm sure people will differ, but my view is that it may not have happened the way it's talked about. Also, the Bible is not literal in all aspects. There are instances where the Bible is literal. There are instances where it's not. And for me, this is one area where it was not literal. It was just saying in very deep words, in very profound words, that something radical happened within the kingdom of God. Because resurrection, as far as the journey of resurrection is concerned, the resurrection proper will only happen when Jesus is resurrected. Any other resurrection that had taken place before is not of much weight. The resurrection of Jesus is the real resurrection that triggers other resurrections that will come, that will not necessarily come into through physical bodies. Because the physical body resurrection is not sustainable. Otherwise, Lazarus would still be allowed after the resurrection that happened before Jesus resurrected.
You know, now that you are on that resurrection theme,
Yes.
because actually Matthew records that these people resurrected, and they were seen in the streets. But beyond that, no one else talked about it. Whereas you'd expect that this is a big thing. Maybe there should be a voice coming from the resurrected, somewhere in the, but it's after that. It's over.
Some interviews.
Maybe they're telling you that maybe it was not, as you say, as literal as it is.
Yeah, and that's why I'm persuaded that it may not have been literal, but Matthew Matthew was one of the disciples. We cannot fault what he's saying, but he's kind of telling us, resurrection, the death of Jesus had so much weight that the whole world was turned upside down. Everything had changed. It was never the same again. It was not business as usual. It was business unusual.
Okay, let's stay with the resurrection again, and staying with the words of the cross.
Yes.
Seems to be quite building up to something.
Yes.
This is a thief.
Yes.
Who is next to Jesus.
Indeed.
And then he tells Jesus, "Remember me."
Yeah.
And what does Jesus say? Today,
Be with me in paradise.
Today,
yes,
you'll be with me in paradise.
Yes.
Now, one asks, is there like an ongoing paradise and a postponed one?
But I would ask then, he tells him tonight. I would answer that question in another one. Did Jesus go to paradise that night? Because he tells him tonight, you'll be with me in paradise.
Well, so if you're asking me, then I would say, he took the hell route.
He descended into hell.
He descended into hell. According to the Apostles' Creed, he descended into hell.
But
right?
he didn't tell the thief, you walk to me to hell, and then the day after, we will ascend to heaven. So I think that's what I'm saying. We can never take the Bible very literally. There's one early theologian called Origen, and Origen was the view that everything in the Bible is not literal. I don't fully agree with him. In fact, very many people criticized him. But I think he was right to some extent, that we cannot take everything that is said in the Bible on face value. That everything is said is the way it is. You remember the story of the guy who decided to do everything he read in the Bible. Randomly open a page and it says, and Judas took a rope and hanged himself. He wanted to take that as an instruction from the Bible. But then he decided, let me see whether there's a series of what has just been said by reading another portion. And the other portion says, and Jesus told them, go and do likewise. So meaning, taking the rope, go and do likewise. Then he decided to read one more. And the one more that he read is where Jesus was telling Judas, what you're about to do it fast. So you see the series is going on very well, that Judas took a rope and hanged himself. Go and do likewise. What you want to do, go and do it fast. So the guy hanged himself because of taking the Bible literally.
And now, what would you say that Jesus meant when he told the thief, today you'll be with me in paradise?
I think this was a promissory note, that paradise is there. And it's me who will usher people into paradise. And you can count yourself part of that paradise. It was a promissory note. It may not have taken place already. Wherever the souls of the dead are, is where the soul of the thief is, awaiting the realization of paradise. It was a promissory note, and Jesus, because he's the one in charge of our entry into heaven, can speak with confidence. It's like if I have a job, I own a company, and you want a job there, and we met days before the interview, I can as well tell you that you'll get the job. You have got the job, yet you have not come for the interview. Because I know when all interviews are done, I'll personally be the person to make the final decision. So to me, looking at what Jesus was saying, he was saying for sure that this guy will get to heaven. Will get to paradise. It was a promissory note. So that guy can carry that note with him and tell Jesus, remember, you made the promise to me. And Jesus, I made the promise. You are in paradise. I said you are in paradise. I spoke in present future, but although it was something in the distant future.
Okay.
That would be my view.
Which brings me to a thought of a regular expression,
Yes.
especially in funerals.
Yes.
You will hear family members or dear persons to whom the departed is dear, say that I know that he or she is happy, is looking, at us from heaven.
Yes.
And that you get, you have had that
sure.
expression.
Severally,
I know that she or he is looking down
At us. Yes.
from a happy place.
Yes.
Now, today,
Yes.
you'll be with me
in
paradise.
Yes.
So the connection there is that people would say, but our beloved has gone to paradise.
Yes.
And can you maybe speak to that expression at funerals?
I think it will belong as human beings to claim about what is happening beyond this life. I know many churches, particularly the mainstream churches, even at the point where they do the committal, when someone is dead, they talk about hope. They hope that there will be life after this death. They don't categorically say we are sure that it has happened, because we still believe as Christians that there is, having been taught by Apostle Paul, that there is a waiting period. Because Apostle Paul says at his selection, those who died and those who are alive will alive at the same time. He says that those who are alive should not assume that they will beat the dead. And because those ones are dead and we call them late, that they will be late. And we who are alive when the final day comes, that will beat them. No, it will be like the twinkle of an eye. That's the way he puts it. So in other words, if we are to study theology critically, there would be no point of talking about some people who are in heaven and us who are here who are aspiring to go there. There is a period which to human beings may be long, but to God it's a very short time. In his own designs is a very short time. So I would fault anybody who is saying that someone is looking at us from heaven already, because heaven is, I don't think, is already declared. It for sure will be declared. And it's only Jesus who can talk about it with confidence, because he's God. He knows what will be in and what will be out. But for us, I think let's accept that death has taken place. There is a period of waiting. And when that period comes to an end, the dead and the alive will get there at the same time. So there's no point of talking about someone who has already got there, waiting somewhere as we struggle, as we hustle here.
And looking down.
And looking down at us. I don't think it
so
will
be
theoretically correct.
Faulty.
No, for sure. In the same way, we also fault people who talk about rest in peace. Because we believe when the soul parts with the body, it is the business of God now from that point going forward. The same way, a culture that has developed over time, that when we attend a funeral, you find people speaking to the dead person, you are a great dad, you brought us up, we are very thankful to you. And for sure, that's not... Theologically, we are long.
Maybe psychologically it's helpful.
Maybe it heals.
But theologically?
Maybe it's therapeutic. But theologically, it's far off. Because the issue is that once dead, the soul is the business of God. Wherever it is, wherever the souls are kept, the Lord is in good business himself.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I'm sure the viewers who are listening are wondering, okay. Theologically, it's quite, it needs to be refined, our thinking on those moments.
Certainly.
Interesting. All this is coming from, this cross language.
Yes.
And we cannot but notice the prominent role carried out by women around the cross and after the resurrection.
Indeed.
They seem, because especially if you read the Gospel of Mark, men, the Peters and the like, seem to have run off,
Sure.
And the persons who have the staying power, and hanging around the cross are the women, right?
Yes.
Can you comment about that?
Yeah, in fact, women play a very prominent role. Whenever in the story of Jesus, when we are told that something went wrong, it's mostly associated with men. When it comes to the betrayal, when it comes to the crucifixion, when it comes to the disciples, being taken to the Garden of Gethsemane and not playing with Jesus, when it comes to that the shepherd will be struck and the sheep will scatter, it's all men. But
including Peter got into trouble.
In fact, Peter also got into trouble through a lady. And I think if you read the Bible and not read it again literally, it will look like what happened was by default, that women were allowed Jesus and they were there all the way. But for sure, if you again look at it more critically, it's like there was a message that was being sent, that going forward, the ministry of Jesus will not be as masculine as it has been. And that's why women come, you'd say that they are latecomers, but they come and with a lot of storm. They storm the scene. Because remember, even Apostle John now writing about what happened and how the women were early in the tomb and wondering who would move the stone. And when they got there, the stone was moved. And as they were wondering who had done it, an angel appeared and explained to them that they should not be looking for the dead, among the living among the dead. And then they started spreading the information to the apostles, to the disciples who were not aware that it had happened. That is not by default. I believe it was
when you
divine.
are at that, at the question of who will roll away the stones, would you think that on a day-to-day, they were wondering, where are the men?
Sure.
Right? And we are not complete because there's a stone to roll, and there's no man amongst us.
And the men have chickened
right?
out.
So what are we going to do? But then they find that the stone is already...
Sure. That again, that's a new thing, the way you have looked at it. That why were they wondering who is going to roll the stone? The point is that such masculine jobs were done by men. But the men have fled. They are nowhere to be seen. We are aware that Peter had led the disciples to Lake Galilee, and they were already fishing. They were doing better things than going to roll stones, because there were returns, of course, through fishing. And I believe it's not by default that these women take a front line. It was all divinely purposed. That at that point, since we are getting into a new phase of the Christian journey, that the women now will play a prominent role going forward. They may have been passive. They may have been edged out when the going was good. But when it became tough, women just came up. And there was no opposition because there were no men to tell them now, no women beyond this point. Previously, you could stop them and tell them now, this is men business. But now, since men have abandoned it, the women just find themselves prominently at the right place and on the right side of history.
When you're talking about that, one of the other words of the cross, Jesus spoke on the cross, is he doesn't just say, mother, behold your son, but goes ahead to say, son, behold your mother. It's like, it's like an equation that is balanced.
Sure. I am sure if you were to look at the place of women towards the conclusion of the earthly ministry of Jesus Christ, it would just come out so well that it was designed that at this point, at going forward, you cannot just tell women that you are here to be seen. They are playing a very important role. They are very active participants, and therefore, no matter what you do, this is something you can't wish away.
And when Jesus rises from the dead, we find that it is actually, especially in the Gospel of Mark, he entrusts that message to the women.
Indeed.
So the resurrection news are first carried, by the women.
Yeah. So from that point, from the point when, in fact, let's say from the point when Jesus is heading to the cross. And you remember there were women, Luke says that the women were crying and he was telling them, no, women, you shouldn't weep over me, weep over your children, because you'll be, barren women will be more happier than those who had children. You see, there's a conversation between Jesus and the women, and it doesn't sound a very bad conversation. And the women, and Mark is very clear that the women, even as he was put on the cross, were there. They watched as he was put on the cross, meaning that they were never meters very far away from where the activity was taking place. No wonder when the resurrection takes place, again, we realize that they are also very, very actively involved. Yes.
Okay. And Reverend, I want to ask you this question.
Yes.
Coming from that conversation around women.
Yes.
Because there are many discussions around
Yes.
the ordination of women.
Yes.
Or how far should women go into priesthood? How far should women go into church leadership?
Yes.
And there are two schools of thought.
Yes.
Some say they shouldn't go to the helm of leadership. Others have no problem at all with having women go to the helm of church leadership. Your take, coming from this cross context?
I think what happened at Crucifixion through to Resurrection would seem to open the doors for women in a very big way, in ways that maybe women would not wish that it be that way, but there is evidence that is that we can't fight against. That the women just got there, and in some places they just got there because the men were not allowed to stop them, and or the men did not think it's important now to be at the tomb or allow that area. They were busy doing other things. So when it comes to matters of resurrection, it's like men were latecomers. Yes, they had been active with Jesus all through, up to the point where he is arrested. We see a lot of activity by men. But beyond that point, something seems to give. That the men are no longer very active, and the women now feel the vacuum, and they feel it quite well. And therefore, it's like now the doors open from that point for women. And therefore, it would be difficult for me to say that women can only get to a certain level and not get to a certain level because it like they opened the door for themselves, or they found, even if they didn't open the door because they never moved the stone, the door was opened for them. And they found space. And if the angel could engage the women and tell them, women, the Lord has listened. He's not here. Go and tell the guys in Galilee, to go and tell the guys in Jerusalem to go and meet Jesus in Galilee. Now, this is very important information being entrusted to women.
Actually, it's, you know, from what you say about the context,
yes,
the resurrection is the highest news.
Yes, yes,
you know?
yes.
It's not just important information,
yes,
but it's information.
And it's exclusively shared with the women. They are told, go and tell the disciples that they are going to meet the risen Christ in Galilee.
Okay, you know, go tell the disciples. And at that particular time, there's one disciple less.
Yes.
Because there was a guy called Judas.
Yes.
Whom we cannot talk about the cross without asking ourselves again, was Judas a victim? You know? Really? Because this had to happen, you know, in the calendar of events. Yes. Or was he really a villain? Like he really was a bad guy?
Yeah, sure. It's also a very difficult question to answer. Because for sure it was prophesied that the Son of Man would come and die on the cross. And if it was to die on the cross, somebody had to do that activity. So it would look like Judas was right. He was just being a cog in the wheel, and he facilitated what should have happened. But on the other hand, again, you look at, you know, situations that happen in life, that all of us are born of women who die at some point. But we never celebrate anybody who causes murder simply because somebody had to die. Although I'm sure even when we attend funerals, we say, the Lord that giveth, the Lord has taken away. But for sure, when we catch up with such guys, we drag them to court and put them through a trial. They could as well say, you know, that guy was to die someday. So what I did was part of the designs of heaven, the designs of God. So therefore, much as these are difficult questions that we cannot fully say that we have the answers, but we should know that we should never take up a role that is not directly, you know, given unto us. That Judas, you are responsible. Because even as Jesus talks to Judas, he does not talk to him as if something good is about to happen. He doesn't. He should have given him a mentor and told him, Judas, you know, you are the guy who is going to give the score. Yeah, we are going for a match, and you are the guy. You know, this is our star in this match. No, he appears to have a quarrel with Judas. You're telling him, you know, I'm surprised that one of us here is going to betray me, and you can go and do it fast, but you're not doing the right thing. Therefore, it is a double-edged sword in that Jesus had to die on the cross. And it was prophesied, and it happened for the good of the entire humanity. But at the same time, Judas did what he should not have done. So, for sure, and most theological issues are that way. They never have an answer that is quite, you know, this is the answer, you place your finger on it. And that's why business of heaven is something we should look forward to. Because it's, as Paul says, it's beyond human understanding.
And then he says, now we see in part, you know.
Indeed.
But then, to be clear, now we'll see Judas in a double-edged way.
Yes.
In one way, it had to be done.
Yes.
On the other hand, he's responsible.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So, but then it shall be clear,
yes,
you know, exactly what happened
yes,
at that particular moment. It's interesting when you think about it. And even more intense in terms of a place where our mind must go. Is the Trinity.
Yes.
And we talk about that in the Apostles' Creed, everywhere, it's a big thing. It's actually one of the big tenets of the Christian faith.
Sure.
The Father, the Son, and the Spirit being, three in one. Different, but equal and not separate. That whole equation there.
Indeed.
And here comes Jesus, who is a God, and he dies on the cross. And the question is, what was the form of the Trinity at the death of Jesus Christ, who is
God.
Yes.
Yeah, another puzzling issue about now God dead. Yeah, I remember even someone saying, there was a time that Jesus was in a boat and he fell asleep. So God was asleep. Meaning, who was learning the world at that time when God was asleep? And who was learning? Again, you can even go back to the time he was in the womb of his mother. The 9 months he was there, the waiting period. Who was learning the world when the CEO was in the womb of his mother? So such questions are difficult to answer. But again, we cannot limit God to our human limitations. Because human limitations is that I'm here, I can't be at home. While I'm here, I can't be in my church. I can't be wherever I should be. We should never limit God to the fact that he must do things the way we do ourselves. Therefore, when we know that Jesus is dead, since it's God who designed it, we should not assume that God is dead. Yes, there is death, and for sure Jesus died. But we should never assume that the world, there is a vacuum. Because for human beings, if someone is dead, they're just dead.
And the question is, that's exactly what the question is.
Yes.
Because Jesus did not faint on the cross.
Yes.
He actually died.
Yes.
And the implication of that death to that, what we can call grand formula, in terms of God and his economy, that gap, how are we supposed to consume it? Or are we supposed to just leave it out to mystery? Or is there a way that we can be able to conceive it? That Jesus is dead, but God is intact.
Humanly, there is a gap, and a very serious one. Because here is God, and he's dead. And we say he descended into hell, meaning that it was total death. It wasn't faked. It was death.
But you go to hell.
Yeah.
There are more questions there because he went to take the keys. There are some keys that he went to take. You know that. When you set it into hell. And there's a preaching that happens in hell. For the people who maybe never had the earlier prophets. So there's a lot of hell activity as well.
There's a lot of hell theology that can take a lot of time to talk about.
Yes.
But let's stick to the issue that you have raised.
The Trinity, yes.
About the Trinity and the death of Jesus, and what was happening. Was God now less something that he ought to have?
As somebody used the word, was God limping?
At that point.
Yeah.
Well, it would look like, looking at it from the human being's point of view, it would look like there was some gap. But I like what the Waswahili people say, Mungu si Athumani. Athumani is the name of a human being. Meaning that the way you'd view Athumani, Athumani, if Athumani died, he is dead. If Athumani was away from home, he is away from home. If Athumani is on safari, he is on safari. So Mungu si Athumani, meaning that whatever transpires within divinity is not necessarily human. That there is something missing. There is a missing link in the fact that God, Jesus Christ is dead. These are things that, once again, though we would not wish to, we would want to leave them to God. We would like to take them to God in prayers. Because for sure, it would look like there's a gap. But for sure, God being who he is, he cannot be inadequate. There's no way God can be inadequate. There's no way the world would be left to the management of anybody else. It is God, it was God, and it will be God. And since God is able to do what we are not able to do, and Jesus demonstrated this a lot. Jesus was able to walk on water. So, but don't try that at home, because it can't work. And then you remember Jesus was feeding 5,000 people with, I think, 5 loaves and 2 fish. Again, never try that in one of your restaurants.
And with enough to go home with, right?
You must
leftovers.
You must keep on stocking. your fish and your bread if you want to feed people. So there is a lot of biblical evidence. Again, how was Jesus conceived? Through the Holy Spirit. Again, his resurrection itself is another big story. So the fact all those things surround the divinity are enough to convince us that here, this is God.
It's more than we can perceive.
It's just God.
And then, just when we are at it,
Yes.
In that space of more than we can perceive,
Yes.
this is one place that we find Jesus, subordinating himself.
Yes.
Using the subordination language,
Yes.
as if the Father
Yes.
is greater.
Yes, and even saying he doesn't know the day.
Yeah, and there are several other places.
Yes.
But one of the places where Jesus really speaks language of almost lesser is at the cross.
Yes.
Father, why have you
Forsaken
me?
Yes.
Father, to you I commit my spirit.
Yes.
A lot of subordination language.
Yes.
Until when anyone who says the Son is equal,
Yes.
has a lot of, there's a lot of noise there.
Yes.
Theological noise.
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, you just comment on that.
Yeah, again, we see that the whole purpose of Jesus coming into the world had a meaning that is deeper than the way we would see it. Because Jesus was supposed to be total human. He was also supposed to be total God. How does he become total human if he doesn't confess that he is ignorant, like all human beings? I do not even know the day that I'll come back. When he is questioned, when are you coming back? He says, these things are beyond me. And then but again, he says, I'm the way and the life, and you can never get to the Father unless through me.
If you have seen
Yes,
me,
you have seen the Father. I'm the bread of life and all that language. So this is an issue that the church has dealt with over years about who Jesus was. And it has made churches split because people feel that this is the way it should be. It was a common heresy in the early church where some people would say that Jesus was human and he only got some status at baptism. Others would say, no, he was God and only appeared to be human. The form that he was putting on of humanity, he had it only for pretense. Again, that was not taken very kindly. So the fact that Jesus was human, we should accept that he was human. But again, remember that he was divine. Again, the fact that he was divine should not make us forget that he was human. And those held together so well that it's not easy for you and me to exactly know how far humanity went, how far divinity went. But the thing is that the chemistry had been done in heaven of combining the divinity and the humanity, and it was going on very well. So Jesus knew when humanity should be proclaimed, and he knew when divinity should be proclaimed, and when there were two and one at the same time.
Wow. That's a mouthful.
Yeah, indeed.
It's a mouthful.
Indeed.
And let's get some more maybe exciting, a matter to engage.
Yes.
And that's the resurrection,
Yeah.
right? Now, Paul says that if Jesus did not rise from the dead,
Yes.
then we are to be pitied
Yes.
above all people.
Yes.
Yes. Implying that the resurrection then is the make, is the break of the Christian faith.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Just paint for us the picture of how intense, the resurrection was and is, and will be. Right?
Yeah, resurrection is so central, as Apostle Paul teaches us. It's so central to our faith because it promises life after death. It promises life in paradise. Without resurrection, then we need to just do as Paul says, business in this world and not care about anything else because there's nothing beyond this life. So without resurrection, then we don't hope for anything. We just eat and drink and do things that are related to the world, knowing that there's nothing that will come out of it.
And there are people who live on that philosophy.
Sure.
That, this is it.
Yes.
There's no future.
Yes.
Once you die,
Yes.
that's it.
And then it leaves us very hopeless because the whole business of coming to the world, just come and live and eat and do things and then it's over. What was the whole purpose then of coming to the world? To only, be born, do the number of things that I do, and then die.
And even young people have this philosophy, the YOLO philosophy.
Yeah.
You only live once, so just live the life.
Yes, but when resurrection is introduced into the whole saga, it gives life a purpose. It tells us, oh, so we are not just like anything else. There is something that comes after death, and that's what we are looking forward to. And that makes us hopeful, that makes us active in our faith, because we know that what we are doing here, as Apostle Paul again says, we see it dimly, we see it clearly, and that gives us a better meaning in our lives. Otherwise, any life that does not, that does not put into account that there is resurrection is hopeless. And therefore, the Christian faith would have no meaning if ours is just to do things, get into the motions of the world, and then at some point we are dead and it's over. But when we know that there is life after death, and it's a fact of the Christian faith, then that prepares us for even more quality lies beyond this. And there were philosophers even before the coming of Christ who imagined of such a life. They may not have been Christians, but they were imagining. Socrates and Plato were imagining of a life beyond this life. But it became clear with Christianity that that life is there. And therefore, human soul is not just about business of this world. It's about business beyond this world.
Okay.
Yes.
And when you envision the resurrection, and when you talk about paradise, the one that's mentioned also in the cross language, there is also the introduction of a certain judgment, right?
Yes.
Such that you resurrect, but there is a component. You don't just jump into paradise. There is now the judgment factor.
Yes.
You could put then the resurrection and the judgment, how they correlate.
Yes, that's why we even said earlier that the resurrection that is anticipated has not taken place already. And that's why we were cautious to talk about someone who is seated in heaven already. Because then it will beat the purpose of having a judgment. Because if the guy is already seated cool in heaven, then it would mean then judgment will be only for a few people who are discriminated. But the point is that when the resurrection comes, that's when you separate the wheat from the chaff. And it will be an important event in the history of humanity, because that's when heaven and hell become a reality. They have not become a reality yet. And we also confess it in the Apostles' Creed that the second coming of Christ, and he will judge the living and the dead. And therefore, the resurrection and the judgment are together. They are not separate. They go together, because it's out of judgment. After resurrection, there is judgment to go on either direction. So everybody is assured of resurrection, but judgment will take you east or west.
Okay.
Yes.
It's as on a light note, that anyone who tells you go to hell is theologically out of order.
Indeed.
Because hell is yet to be activated.
Yes, it's
right?
not active yet.
Okay,
Yes,
that's interesting.
yes,
And let's come to some day-to-day spiritual language that we use that is connected to the cross and the resurrection also. Many times you'd hear in prayers and also in declarations, Christian declarations, that I surround you with the blood of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Yes. I speak the blood of Jesus Christ upon this circumstance.
Amen.
Now, what does that mean? Because it looks like the blood has been picked to be in isolation. The blood, as if the blood has, it can be almost, it's almost like in its liquid form. The image we get is almost a liquid form. We speak the blood of Jesus. We protect you with the blood of Jesus. Can you speak to this language?
Well, when Jesus said on the cross that it is finished, then the blood, the whole salvation is not necessarily the issue of blood. We shouldn't mistake that salvation is just an issue of blood, because Jesus was able even to proclaim salvation before he had shed blood. He visited the home of Zacchaeus and he told him salvation has come to this house. He didn't have to prick his heart and remove some blood and make the place, the salvation has come. No, salvation is, blood was shed, but let's take it as a symbol, as we do it even in Holy Communion, that this is a symbol of the salvation that took place, because Jesus would not have died without having nailed and speared, and through all those activities, then blood was shed. But never take blood on its own as the only ingredient necessary for salvation. We embrace the whole ministry of Jesus Christ. We embrace the whole death of Jesus Christ and his resurrection. Blood is just a component of the entire thing. It's not active by itself. It is active in the context that it is Jesus who shed it, loving us. Therefore, it's not that when he died on the cross, some pins of blood were, extracted and maybe preserved somewhere in a freezer, where we have to keep on extracting it and get saved. And when we don't get it, then we are not saved. Our journeys are not saved. Our families are not saved. So we have to keep on, extracting it and putting it on. No. That's losing the point. We have to appreciate that Jesus did his ministry, that Jesus was crucified, that Jesus rose from the dead. How do we remember him? When we go to communion, we remember blood, because that's something that was shed. But we should never take it in isolation, that without blood, then the salvation is not taking place, because that blood was shed in history. Whatever we say about blood today is in history. It happened at that time, and Jesus said, it is finished. So I think that's the way we should look at it. That we don't have to be so keen on, how much blood is there for you in this journey, how much blood is there for you as you go for an examination, that we have to keep on, because even the symbolism of the Passover, of what had happened when the age of death had passed over the house of the Israelites, the blood had already been labbed on the doorposts. It did not have to keep on being labbed every other hour. The moment they slaughtered the animal and put the blood on the doorpost, they waited for salvation. And the age of death came and passed over those homes that had blood on the doorpost. So it's not that something that has to be reactivated every other time. It is something that happened, and we are enjoying, we are part of that salvation that is ongoing.
Okay.
So we should invoke the name of Jesus without necessarily, being very particular that it is the blood.
Okay.
Yes.
That's I like the word that we the phrase we should invoke.
Yes. Yes.
And the invocation is the invocation of what Paul talks about, that the power that brought Christ from the dead is at work within you. So
That's
when
it.
you invoke,
Yes.
you're invoking the fullness of the cross
Yes.
and the resurrection.
Yes. Yes.
And that should tell you definitely it's a powerful invocation.
Indeed.
And it's amazing that just time goes so fast.
Wow.
But before we end,
Yes.
I have to ask you this question also.
Yes.
Resurrection, Easter, cross, big themes.
Yes.
Let's put them in the context of our country.
Yes.
There's drought,
Oh, yeah.
corruption, lots of political competition, a lot of, things going on that our country struggles with a lot of times.
Yes.
Yet here we're talking about invoking, the resurrection power, invoking the name of Jesus.
Yes.
Now, how does Easter speak to the context of our country at the present time?
Well, Easter speaks to the context of our country in that we are part of the resurrected Christ, whose ministry is ongoing. And therefore, we should also not separate the cross from the resurrection, because again, there are people who have got to a point where they want to separate the two, that we don't have to walk the cross to get to the resurrection. We are part of that difficult journey, and we witness some of those difficulties. But our hope and our joy is in knowing that crucifixion was not an end in itself. There was a resurrection beyond it. And therefore, there are challenges that we go through in this world, and they seem to have an upper hand in our lives. And they are part of the crucifixion journey. But at the end of it all, the resurrection will beat crucifixion. And that's why we talk of a Good Friday. Yet it wasn't a Good Friday when it happened in history. When Jesus was put through trial, when he was put through the cross, when he was mocked, when they speared his side, when they did all manner of bad things to him, for sure it wasn't a good day. But now looking at it in hindsight, it was a great day, and that's why we celebrate a Good Friday. Therefore, our Christian journey a spiritual journey is not a journey that is less the troubles that we are going through. And again, we shouldn't fail to do what we are supposed to do, in saying that, Christ resurrected, that he overcame all challenges of this world. Because sometimes there are challenges that are coming sometimes, not because we ought to go through them, but because we haven't done our part as human beings very well. Maybe we have not done our agriculture right. We have not taken care of our environment right. So these challenges are coming. But in other words, we are being told, if we did our human part well, we are assured that resurrection is a fact. It happened and evil was defeated. In other words, evil can be defeated. There is no evil that is so deep that it can never be defeated, because the resurrection is an assurance. But again, the journey of crucifixion is a real journey that people have to go through, though they are assured that it's not an end in itself. It would be, as we said earlier, it would be so desperate if we were to think just about the crucifixion, talk about the pain and the agony and the distress of this life, forgetting that at some point, that agony was put to an end when Jesus resurrected from the dead. But again, the world that we are living in is a world that is characterized by pain, is a world that is characterized by suffering. So whatever suffering human beings are going through, they should first ask themselves, what is our part in this suffering? What can we do to make tomorrow better? But again, remember that there are still things that happen even when you have planned very well. Like the cyclone that happened in Mozambique and other countries, or the tsunamis that happen in this world. People have planned them very well. We hear issues that happen in what we call the developed world. So that means then, heaven is still reminding us that you are part of the journey of the cross. But I can assure you, at the end of it all, the journey that you have gone through of crucifixion will be concluded in victory.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's a wonderful, wonderful place to end our program with the word victory.
Wow, thank you.
And it's the first time you've used the word victory in the entire hour, and that's an amazing end, victory, right? And Reverend, it's been very, very good having you.
Thank you.
And your comments and your engaging these issues, very, very insightful.
Thank you.
And we'll definitely have you again.
Thank you.
Because you seem to be familiar with the heavy part of the theological things and biblical tough portions that sometimes we want to escape. Amen. But you break them down for us in a way that even for people as they go through Easter, as they watch this program, they're going to have a happy Easter.
Thank you.
Because several things have been clarified.
Wow, well,
thank you so much.
Pleasure for having me.
Viewers, as we have heard, evil, whatever the extent, is defeatable. That's the message of Easter. No matter how strong evil comes, it will always be a step lower than the power of God. And the crucifixion will always at some point be overtaken by the resurrection. What else can we say? From Spotlight, from Hope TV, do have a bright future. Thank you.